Town Square Media Station. WTUG HD2 Northport. And W265CG Tuscaloosa. Tide 100.9. And streaming on the Tide 100.9 WTUG HD2 Northport. And W265CG Tuscaloosa. Tide 100.9. And streaming on the Tide 100.9 app. A Town Square Media Station.
Here's what's trending on the Tuscaloosa thread.
Effective immediately, face masks are no longer required for fully vaccinated people in most University of Alabama facilities, according to an email sent to the student body today. Unvaccinated students and faculty must always wear a mask inside all university buildings. The university considers people to be fully vaccinated 2 weeks after their second dose is administered. Buddy's Rib and Steak announced an unexpected closure over the weekend after a vehicle crashed into the wall of the restaurant again. The mom and pop steakhouse located on Laureline B. Wallace Boulevard North in Northport has faced issues with motorists crashing into the building before. According to their Facebook page, it indicates that the restaurant will be back to normal operations on Tuesday, May 25th. On Friday, May 28th, Tuscaloosa City Schools will be hosting 3 separate commencement ceremonies for its graduating seniors. To get those times, be sure you open up the free Tuscaloosa Thread app now.
Quarterback back at the 5, steps up, gets drilled. Yes, sir, he gets mashed. And that is going to be the ball game. 6, 5, 4, 3. They can't snap it. They can't stop it. They can't win it. Alabama wins the ball game.
Darian Thomas, linebacker, Alabama.
He was a nightmare for people that had to try to prepare for him because he had unique skills.
Just go get the quarterback. I felt sorry for some of those poor tackles that came in and had to go against him because they didn't realize what they were getting themselves into.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Son, I got to do that in this.
Lights out.
Sacking the cornerback is just like you devastate a city, or you cream a multitude of people. I mean, it's just like you put all the offensive players in one bag, and I just take a baseball bat and beat on the bag. So each time he came over there, I tried to tear his damn head off.
Let's play some football. Let's play some football.
The pressure is on. This is Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Focus on what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. Think about that. Don't think about how you feel, how tired you are, how hot it is. You got to push yourself on the field like when you're playing football.
It's my honor to present the national championship trophy to Coach Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide.
To me, this is the ultimate team. All these guys bought into everything they needed to do to be the best players that they could be. There's more togetherness on this team than almost any team that we've ever had. And they had to overcome and persevere so much adversity through this season, and they've done it magnificently. And I'm so proud of this group for what they've been able to accomplish and going undefeated and winning the national championship.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
Your man overthrown. Spit out the ball.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome into Off the Edge. I am your host, Jacob Harrison. So glad you can be with us on a insanely way too hot Monday. I have not been prepared correctly. I had less than a week to get my allergies adjusted, and now it's incredibly hot outside. What was it, like 92 today in Tuscaloosa? Man, just melt me in the pavement outside, please, Tommy. Scrambled, not fried, scrambled.
I didn't know part of my job producing the show was to make eggs, but I'm on it. All right, scrambled, you got it. Give me 10 minutes. I'll look up a YouTube tutorial.
Right. Salt and pepper, milk, the whole nine. Welcome into the show. We've got a lot to get into tonight. It was actually a pretty exciting day. We actually had news today, whether it was ethically produced or not, who knows, but Julio Jones has said that he will not spend his 11th NFL season with the Atlanta Falcons. 10 years ago, the Atlanta Falcons trade up to the number 6 overall pick to make him the second receiver selected in that draft. Remember earlier, AJ Green went 4th to the Cincinnati Bengals. He also leaves the Bengals this year, not nearly to as much fanfare as one of the best receivers in football. Julio has not been able to stay healthy throughout all those years, but nonetheless, he is the all-time leader in receptions, yards, and touchdowns for the Atlanta Falcons all time, but he will be taking his talent somewhere else. It's kind of been the most widely known secret in the NFL, but nonetheless, he kind of affirmed it this morning on Fox Sports 1's Undefeated when Shannon Sharp, a Hall of Famer in his own right, cold called him in the middle of the show, whether it was staged or not, who knows, but nonetheless, he said that he wants that he's out of there. He's no longer going to be a Falcon, and he wants to go somewhere where he can win. And he also vehemently denied the idea of him playing for the Dallas Cowboys, despite that picture surfacing up on social media of him wearing a Dallas Cowboys hoodie. So thankfully, that will not be happening. He will not be joining up with his fellow alumni from the Alabama football program, Amari Cooper, but he will find somewhere else to play. We'll get into all that, and we'll especially get into it at 7:15 when William McFadden of the Falcoholic joins the show. He'll break that entire situation down with us and get an idea of what Atlanta Falcons fans are going through. I know that they're in a perpetual state of sadness as it is, just ask Tommy Paradise, but nonetheless, here we are. So we'll get into that. We'll see what's going on with baseball and softball. We're going to dive in very deeply on what is shaping up to be an absolutely stacked defensive line front for the Alabama Crimson Tide. We'll look at the top 3 guys, and then I think the 7 other guys who have a right to be a part of the rotation this season for the Crimson Tide. It's almost a shame, but I mean, Alabama has 10 guys who could be relied upon on the field this season. And, hopefully you don't have to see all 10. Hopefully, the guys can stay healthy. But if things do kind of turn out how they have in the past with certain players, then you at least feel confident about those kind of guys. We'll talk about how college football is evolving, and I think it's for the better, but it's going to be slow, and we're going to be extremely annoyed by it. We'll discuss those topics with my good friend Joey Blackwell of Bama Central. We'll talk to him at 8:15. You can always join us in the streams, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. You can leave a comment on whatever stream you're on. Like, share, and subscribe. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Just search it up at Off the Edge 109. We'll be glad to chat with you in the comment section as well. Throughout the show, you can also call us 205-342-9904. You see the number plastered across the screen. You can call into that number anytime during the show that we're not on with a guest. And of course, we'll chat it up with you there as well. Tommy, I do have to start with you, though, because you are the resident Falcons fan. And
Hi, that is me.
I know that, you walked in right as I was about to tweet out the news for Tide that Julio had said that, and you walked in kind of a jovial mood, hey, we're on for 7. Let's do this thing, right? And then you saw Julio Jones texted on my phone, and your mood kind of shifted and you walked out.
Part of me shouldn't have looked at your phone, honestly, but I have wandering eyes, so that's just what happens.
No, that's fine.
Say the question for me. I apologize. Got you off.
Just this whole thing with Julio. I mean, a decade, probably the best Atlanta Falcon all time, and now you've thought about it for well over a year that this is probably what was going to happen with Julio. But next season, if he has it his way, he won't be wearing black and red in the ATL.
For the record, at the beginning, I was kind of ticked because if you don't know me, I wear crimson glasses, and an Alabama player playing for my favorite NFL team, that's the dream. That's
Right.
like, oh my goodness. Because, for Atlanta, the most famous Atlanta player they had when I was younger was Chris Moore. He was a punter.
Right.
So when they drafted Julio, I remember my dad saying we traded too much for him, and then Julio just showed up and showed out, and it's like, okay, maybe he was worth all those picks. By the way, it wasn't a maybe. It was absolutely he was worth all those picks. I've had time to think it over, and my initial reaction is that there's so much about this story that I don't think we knew at the time. Because here's what I had originally, and Terry, who's the new GM, I thought, honestly, he was shopping Julio. And I was like, okay, this dude's a former Saints scout. He's a sleeper agent. At this point, I'm beginning to think that the Saints have just sent him over. And then more info starts to come out. And the biggest thing was from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. He tweeted out that Julio actually asked for a trade. And Atlanta said, okay, and they respected it. So my point of view is I have to respect this too. I don't like it, but the way I can describe it is this. If someone doesn't like fettuccine Alfredo and you put a bowl of fettuccine Alfredo in front of them, yes, I'm Italian before those people ask, you have to respect that they don't want that. So you take the bowl of fettuccine Alfredo and eat it. I like fettuccine Alfredo, so I'll eat it. There's a lot about this that I'm just confused about. And part of me just thinks with a new coaching staff and everything that Atlanta's been going through for the past 4 years, they tried with Stark, Marvel movies. They tried with Sark for 2 years, and somehow that didn't work, which still boggles my mind because then Sark came to Alabama and did everything right. And then they bring back Dirk Cutter, who couldn't cut his teeth anywhere else and couldn't seem to figure out that maybe a run game would be good because their run game was terrible. They were like 29th. It just, to me, feels like this. And this is someone from on the outside looking in and a Falcons fan. Julio just didn't want to deal with it again because there's been so much coaching turnover and there's been so many problems in Atlanta with figuring it out that I don't blame him. And I was one of the proponents to say, give him a year, maybe 1 year. And then if it doesn't work, the honeymoon's over, he can go on. But once again, it goes back to the original statement. I'm not part of the Falcons coaching staff or ownership or anything. I don't suit up on Sundays. I don't do anything with the team besides wear a Falcons hat now and again, and everybody pokes fun at me because that's Super Bowl. I just want, for the record, everyone to know, if I was a betting man, and I'm being dead serious when I say this, and I said it to Kendall, who's a superstar intern here, I'll say it to Michael whenever he rejoins us, and I think Kim, who's also going to be a future intern on Off the Edge, are all Boston sports fans. If I was a betting man, I'm going to be honest. It pains me to say this. I think New England is in the front running for Julio Jones.
And I'll tell you right now, I'd be ecstatic if that's how it turned out to be, is that he is a New England Patriot, because it simply would mean that he's not a Baltimore Raven or a Cleveland Brown.
See, I was about to ask you, because once again, take this with a grain of salt. It was on Reddit, and I perused the Falcons subreddit. Someone was like, yo, Terry's working on it. Baltimore is the team that is definitely in the running. And I switched the camera to you because you look dead on the inside.
It hurts, but they've got the capital and they've got the space and they've got the win now mentality. I think they're like 40-7 with Lamar Jackson as their quarterback, so it would make a lot of sense.
Terrible running back, by the way.
Right,
can you believe a running back won the MVP?
Just awful.
If you bash Lamar Jackson, you officially have no idea. A Steelers fan will agree with me.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an incredible quarterback. But nonetheless, when it comes down to it, I do understand your plight, though, because for a long time there were no Alabama alumni on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and now my team has two prominent stars in Minkah Fitzpatrick and Najee Harris that, it would just suck if they weren't there all of a sudden after 10 years of service, with still plenty left in the tank. But if you maybe missed it, if you maybe missed the cold call that Shannon Sharp gave to Julio Jones live on the air, then I'm going to play that for you right now before we start our conversation with William McFadden of the Falcoholic. Take a listen, and if you're on the streams, enjoy the video of it as well. This was Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless cold calling Julio Jones on Fox Sports 1's The Undefeated this morning.
We call? Okay, we are calling. We're calling.
You watching, Julio?
I really hope he answers here.
Julio, have the guts to pick up the phone.
What's happening?
Yeah.
All right.
Julio. Hold on. Let me put you on. Can you hear me? I got you. This is your favorite uncle. What's going on, bro? Man, nothing much. About to go meet up with my brother. What's happening with you? Man, look. You want to go to the Cowboys, Julio? Or you want to stay in Atlanta? Oh, man, nah, I'm out of there, man. You
He's
out of there?
out. He's out of there.
Are you going to... Ideally, where would you like to go? Right now, I want to win. Okay. Well, don't go to Dallas. If you go to, you ain't winning in Dallas, Julio. Man, listen, come on, man. You already know I know. Okay.
Can you remind him we're on television
Ask
right
him
now?
why he wore the Dallas.
Listen. You know how people is, man, with all that going on with the picture. Yeah. And all that stuff like that. Okay. Man, I ain't never been on that. You know what I'm saying? Okay. That's good enough. Yeah. Julio, I'll talk to you later. Thanks for calling me back. We on air, but I appreciate you calling me, dog. You know I know my nephew was gonna pick up. Oh yeah, nah. Yeah, I ain't going to Dallas, man. I never thought about going to Dallas. Okay. I appreciate that, bro. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Now he might not have any choice.
I told you about that.
Wild situation. Whether or not it was staged, who knows? We'll get into the ethics of it later. But up next, we are going to talk with the Falcoholics beat writer, William McFadden. Next here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
Justice 30-minute.
Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge. I'm your host, Jacob Harrison. Got to remind you that the show is always brought to you by Alabama Vintage, AlabamaVTG.com, 2210 University Boulevard, under the Crimson Awning across from City Hall in the heart of downtown Tuscaloosa. Go check them out. Pick you up some vintage gear to fill out your Alabama fandom, whether it's on your person or in your home. Charlie will hook you up. Check them out on Instagram at Alabama Vintage. Right now, we go to the phone lines. 205-342-9904. By the way, if you want to call in and react after our conversation with the Falcoholics writer, William McFadden, going to break down this Julio Jones situation. What's going on, William?
Oh, man. first off, thanks for having me on. I'll try to break it down as much as I can, but I mean, I think everybody's head is spinning a little bit after what took place earlier today.
Yeah, it was kind of a bizarre situation. It's not something you see very often. I saw plenty of agents saying this is why I don't let any of my clients go on their show. But nonetheless, Julio kind of just let it be known, the worst kept secret in all of the NFL, that this will, or last season rather, is in fact the last season that he will be wearing red and black for the Atlanta Falcons. But I got to ask you right out of the gate, early on in the conversations dating back to as far as a year ago, it seemed like it was more of a team casualty where it had more to do with his contract and the numbers just not adding up. And then reports today after the fiasco on Undisputed, Rappaport, Schefter, that lot was saying he asked for the trade back in March officially. So is this more on the Falcons and the new regime, the cap space, those sorts of things? Or is it Julio himself just wanting out of the ATL?
I mean, I think it's a mix of both, right? And the new regime, Terry Fontenot, knew coming in, what the situation was, and it was obviously compounded by hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic that deflated the salary cap for the first time, in a really long time. So that certainly didn't make anything easier. But yeah, obviously the revelation that Julio may have requested this trade a few months ago, that's something that I've been thinking about all day. I'm sure a lot of people have, but what could be the reasons behind that? And I think it's a little bit of like an Occam's razor situation where maybe the simplest reason is the correct reason here. And I think what he said, on Undisputed right after he basically set him out of here is I want to win. And for as much as everybody here in Atlanta kind of talks about this offense like it's still 2016, right? Like even last year at this time, everybody was talking about, man, they got Todd Gurley. They have 11 first-round picks on offense. That's never happened before. We're going to light up the league, all of that stuff. And that never really played out, and you ended up being 4-12. And so he's 32 years old. I think the injury thing is a little bit overblown. I don't know this for a fact, but just having been around Julio over the years, and seeing him gut everything out, I think he probably could have played more games last year if the team was in the thick of it. So that might have been a little bit of a business decision. And if it was, I don't really begrudge him that. But he may want to play 2-3 more years in this league and do it somewhere where he's got a better chance, a more realistic chance of competing for a Super Bowl. I mean, he's competitive. Everybody in this industry is incredibly competitive. And, I think that ever since their Super Bowl run in 2016, the team has just record-wise gotten worse and worse with each successive year. And it could just be a grass is greener on the other side. And I think, if anything, I respect the organization keeping things quiet. And they were taking some heat throughout this process. And if it really is true that, Julio requested this trade, I actually kind of applaud Terry Fontenot and the front office for honoring his request, kind of quietly, or somewhat quietly, I guess, gauging the interest around the league and not really putting it out there that, no, Julio wants out. And whether or not he wants out because he's fed up with the Falcons, I don't get the sense that that's the case. It could be, but I could see it being a real plausible scenario where, hey, my time is limited in the NFL. If you guys are going to rebuild or at least be a few years away from really seriously being in playoff contention year in and year out, I may not have the time to give you guys that. And if that's the case, I mean, it at least makes sense to me. So I think it's a little bit of both. And obviously getting him off the books will give them the cap space that they desperately need to sign all their draft picks.
Hey, William, I'm sure he let you know when he called you, but our producer here on the show, Tommy Paradise, is a massive, massive Atlanta Falcons fan. But not only that, he says it all the time that his go-to source is the Falcoholic, what you guys got going on in SB Nation. It's a lot of fun to him. So I wanted to make sure that he had an opportunity to ask you a question real quick. So I'm going to toss it to him real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
Will, the quick question I have for you is this. We go back to the NFL draft, and the Falcons had the 4th pick, and they selected Kyle Pitts. With all the revelations, it kind of feels like that Kyle Pitts selection really didn't affect it, but do you think it might have exasperated the situation that Julio thought he was getting replaced by Kyle Pitts?
No, I don't get the sense, especially again, if the request was made prior to the draft. If anything, I think that probably makes, it makes me feel foolish and probably makes a lot of people foolish that we had the quarterback conversation for so long. And I actually do remember the night of the draft, I had the thought that could it maybe be somebody like Jamar Chase? If they were serious about maybe looking to move on from Julio, do you just draft, another kind of generational receiver? And they essentially did that with Kyle Pitts. I know he's got a CE next to his name instead of a WR, but I think that they probably, if anything, were maybe grateful that Julio came to them early in the process. It gave them the ability to approach the draft understanding the layout of the land with their roster. And I don't think it was a reactive thing where they draft Kyle Pitts and Julio essentially says, screw you guys, I want out. I think it's a scenario where it was a revelation today for us. But what I've read and what I believe is, and most importantly, is that it doesn't seem like anybody within the organization was really taken off guard by what came out today. And that's probably the most important thing, is that it seems like everything's been laid out on the table, that the Falcons have, let Julio know where they're at, that Julio has let them know where he's at. And I also don't think it's inconceivable that Julio starts the season in Atlanta. I think if reading the pieces, Jonathan Jones had a good piece for CBS, that the Falcons aren't going to just take anything for Julio. And they understand his value, and they're going to want to get, I think, at least a second-round pick, and maybe even that's not, the reports came out that they were asking for first-round compensation, and we saw them do this with the number 4 pick. They understood the value of what they had in that commodity, and they were basically saying, look, if you want to move up to 4, you're going to have to buy us out of the pick. We're not just going to give it to you. And I think the same thing could be true with Julio. And if they can't find the right value, I don't think they're just going to get rid of Julio. And it doesn't seem, at least to me right now, that there's a ton of animosity between Julio and the Falcons. So I don't think that he would basically say, well, I'm just never going to play for Atlanta again. I'm just going to sit out instead of suit up. And I think that there's at least a chance that, he starts the season with the Falcons and maybe they continue to seek trade throughout the year, or they don't and he ends the season and then we're kind of doing this again. Obviously, I don't think they want that to happen because they do need that cap relief. And if Julio's back, that means that you're probably extending Grady Jarrett, but that's, again, adding to your salary cap cost next year and the year after that. And then we're just having the exact same conversation 1 year from now, and nothing's really changed. And I think that is probably the worst case scenario for this organization, is that you don't want to pigeonhole yourself or put yourself in a corner financially next year or the year beyond, which is kind of why we're even having this whole conversation. And if that means that, Julio has made the request and kind of wants to play somewhere else, the team may say, okay, like, we knew we were going to have to make a tough decision here anyway. At least we can maybe give Julio what he wants as a warm regard for all of the years that he's played in Atlanta and all the great memories. And in return, they'll get that cap relief that they really, really need.
You mentioned how today the reports were kind of solidifying the fact that the Falcons do want at least a first-round pick, according to the Schefters of the Rappaports of the world, of course. But we saw last year with DeAndre Hopkins, he moves for a third-round pick. That was a kind of a wild situation with our current offensive coordinator down here in Tuscaloosa, just moving on from an elite receiver. But a few years ago, Mohamed Sanu, the Falcons get a second-round pick for him. And so oftentimes the wide receiver market is very unpredictable. It seemed this year with Juju Smith-Schuster and Kenny Golladay that they were set to make big-time money, and both signed one-year deals for, the above-average market value of a wide receiver in free agency. So realistically, with Julio Jones at 32 years old and with the history of injuries being what they are, he's still that elite, top 5 elite style talent at the position. But how realistic is it for the Falcons to feel like they've won this trade with the compensation that they get in return?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like they're not going to. They clearly have their expectation for what they will deem suitable value in return. And you brought up the Mohamed Sanu trade. I actually would point to that as a reason why teams might be hesitant to give up a first or even a second round pick for Julio, because in hindsight, that trade looks like a massive mistake for Bill Belichick. I mean, Mohamed Sanu, I can't remember if he got cut from the Patriots shortly after the trade was made or just after the season they parted ways, but he never amounted to really anything in New England. And so couple that with, we're seeing young receivers come into the league at such a high rate, really, really good players. You know, you think of Justin Jefferson, you think of A.J. Brown, you think of, just these younger guys. And it's almost like we're going to get a surplus of talented wide receivers in the league. And I think that will deflate the value, because if it's like a running back situation where if you just maybe plug in a league average wide receiver, the drop off between that and a top 10 guy may not be as big as it used to be. And so that's where I could see a team sitting there saying, well, do we really need to spend a second round pick for a 32-year-old wide receiver? Or could we just use our second round pick next year and get a 21-year-old wide receiver who's much more cost effective for 4 years and probably is going to be a pretty good player? I think these are the real conversations that a team would have. Now, all it takes is one team to say, we are a Julio Jones away from making the Super Bowl. Or the team that I like to think about the most with this is Green Bay, because obviously Aaron Rodgers is not very happy. And if you need to kind of make a move to do like a say anything boombox outside of the window, please come back type of message for your franchise quarterback and the league MVP last year, there aren't many better than saying, look, we just got Julio Jones for you. Will you please come back and now you can throw the ball to Devontae Adams and Julio Jones, or turn around and hand it off to Aaron Jones? Like, that's a pretty good deal. So it would only take one team to say, yes, this is worth it. And we've got maybe a surplus of picks the next couple of years. Here, we'll send you a second and a third for Julio. But I think that the Falcons understand that they need to get something. If they trade Julio Jones away for, 2 fourth-round picks, like, people will riot in Atlanta. And I think that they understand that they're better as a team with Julio Jones on the roster than without him. And again, it's going to take a team to buy Julio away from Atlanta rather than the Falcons just getting rid of Julio because they want to. And ultimately, it does still come down to the team. And if they opt to not trade him, then it comes to Julio, and it's like, are you going to hold out and not play games? Or do you want to just come and suit up and run back, and we'll continue this conversation and see what happens from there? But I think teams aren't going to be super willing or just tripping over themselves to throw a bunch of draft picks Atlanta's way for Julio. And I think that the Falcons, not that they're expecting that, but they understand that they may not get the value that they want. And I don't think they're going to rush into just moving on from Julio.
We're talking to William McFadden, writer, podcaster for the Falcoholic of SB Nation. William, you mentioned how the fans would have an outrage if the compensation not meeting their expectations, and that's going to be kind of difficult regardless. But Tommy and I were talking about it in the first segment, how that kind of bridge was made between Tuscaloosa, Alabama Crimson Tide fans and those Atlanta Falcons fans. They kind of come out of the woodwork 10 years ago when that selection was made. But now 10 years later, he's the all-time leader in receptions and yards, I think touchdowns too. He's, arguably one of the greatest players in franchise history. At that memorable Super Bowl run, made one of the most fantastic plays in the game. But all that being said, once this trade does happen, or whatever does come, I mean, it does certainly feel like the end is here. But just speculating moving forward with the trade, how is the fan base going to be able to handle this, and how are they going to remember Julio Jones as a Falcon?
Well, I hope they remember it fondly, because I think on top of just being a one of the all-time greats to ever play the position, a generational talent, however you want to describe Julio. I think there's real respect and admiration for just the type of person he's been. Historically, the receiver position is a little bit more of a diva position. I think it's becoming maybe less that way than it used to be, but I think Julio has always been regarded as maybe the guy who's kind of above the fray when it comes to all of that. And maybe behind the scenes, like you could probably pick or point to a couple of things where, did this kind of tiptoe the line between often just team guy or maybe me first person. But I think on the whole, like Julio is absolutely embodied just a team player. He's a really great person. And he's not a me first person, getting the chance to talk to him. I mean, he hates questions about his contract or about his accolades or whatever. Like he will open up the most when you ask him about his teammates or about charities or different things like that. And so I do think that there's going to be some hurt. I don't think it's sure. Some people are probably frustrated or upset with Julio for kind of doing what he did today. But I also kind of think that the way that it happened, more people are probably upset with that show because it does seem like Julio was caught off guard. And we don't know that for certain, but if that is truly the case and he wasn't necessarily prepared, I think it's not that he just came out and made a press conference and trashed the Falcons for 15 minutes.
Right.
And so I think people will kind of give him the benefit of the doubt there. But at the end of the day, I mean, when he goes into the Hall of Fame, he's going in as an Atlanta Falcon. And that's what I think people should remember and will remember. And the fact that is even the case, because when they move up in the draft to pick him, automatically the risk of him going down as like an all-time bust was huge, because all eyes were on him. He was the guy that they gave up a ransom for. And the fact that he will now go down as one of the greats and that trade looks worth every single penny is frankly incredible. And so he is one of the greatest Falcons of all time. He's on a very, very short list with, probably Deion Sanders, Michael Vick, Claude Humphrey, those guys. And it's going to hurt. I've heard from a lot of Falcons fans today who are obviously and probably rightfully upset and taken aback by how all this played out, but we won't really be able to judge it until a few years down the road when kind of the dust clears. And by that time, I think everybody will just remember the good moments, the fun memories that he provided. And I hope that that's where everybody lands and that Julio Jones will continue to be a Falcon for life in the minds of Atlanta residents and Falcons fans.
Yeah, I certainly see where you're coming from, and I agree greatly with it. I think it was very well put. As a Steelers fan, the kind of the divorces that happened with James Harrison and Troy Polamalu, it was very difficult to take in. But years later, there's nothing but appreciation for the guys, and when they are in the Hall of Fame, like you said for Julio, they go in with that team, and the rest is all history. And you look back on those the pictures years later, like we do with Namath and Franco, in the wrong jersey, and hopefully that'll be the situation with Julio. I kind of want to tie these two into the same question, because you still have a number one wide receiver, Calvin Ridley, another Alabama alumni. His career here was a little rocky because of who was throwing him the ball at times with the accuracy issues there. But nonetheless, he brought a lot to the table here at Alabama, and he certainly has done a lot for the Falcons. He had a career year last year, but couple him with Pitts, the way this offensive line is constructed. Matt Ryan, a fringe Hall of Famer in his own right, I believe, and touch up the running game, but there's still the problems on the defense. So even with all the firepower on offense, including Ridley, is this team even now moving on from Julio Jones potentially? Are they seriously in win now mode with Arthur Smith at the helm, or are they truly rebuilding and they just won't say it out loud?
I think they're in a gray area between the two. I know kind of the public line, and look, it makes sense. If you're a first-time head coach, you're coming here, like, at the end of the day, you are measured by wins and losses. And so if I'm a head coach, I'm going to be saying, yeah, we're doing everything we can right now to win. Yeah, because what else are you going to say? No, right. Get ready for a 2-15 season. But I do think that, at least as I look at the team, I don't see a team that really can compete. Now, we see every year a team like the Chicago Bears that just kind of out and 1 year has the right year, gets the right breaks, and makes the playoffs, or Washington football team, or whatever. A team that preseason nobody was picking to make the postseason. That happens every year. The NFL is built for that to happen. Could that happen with Atlanta? Sure. If Arthur Smith comes in and gets this offense truly back into top 5 offense, I'm working on a piece for this week, basically saying I think the Falcons are right to bet on offense. And this offseason, because they had the limited financial flexibility, they didn't just go load up the defense, even though they lost a lot of pieces over there. But they do seem, taking Kyle Pitts, having Calvin Ridley in place, like the strength of this team continues to be the offense. And I really think Arthur Smith is a great play caller who will figure out how to use all the toys at his disposal in really creative and unique ways. But I still think that it's not a full rebuild, because anytime you are at least starting with a franchise quarterback in place and a number 1 wide receiver, a pretty consistent offensive line, at least in terms of there's not a big bunch of turnover up there. You're losing Alex Mack, which will hurt, but you really just have kind of left guard and center, but you've got some in-house options there to plug in. So it's a good foundation offensively to start with. Defensively is going to be the massive question, and I think it's not where it needs to be yet, but I don't think they're far off, and that's where I get back to the hesitancy to extend somebody like Grady Jarrett. As great of a player as he is, you just don't want to lock down your money next year as well. And if they do want to transition this roster into a more balanced roster and not as top heavy as it used to be, they're going to have to pay Calvin Ridley next offseason, so that's already in consideration. And I just don't know how many teams are really built the best way for success when kind of your 2 wide receivers are among the top 3 highest paid players on your roster. That just, most teams that are winning titles have a little bit more balance than that. And so I'm very excited to watch this team this fall. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I certainly think that it's going to kind of feel like a breath of fresh air from what's happened the past, few seasons. But I think the ceiling is that they maybe sneak into the playoffs as a wild card team, and the floor is probably more akin to what we saw last year, with maybe a couple more wins, just because you're getting the right bounces that kind of went against you last year. But I have very high expectations for Calvin Ridley. I love him as a player, as a person, extremely fun to watch. Pairing him with Kyle Pitts is going to give Arthur Smith a ton of schematic flexibility, because when you break the huddle with 2 tight ends, the defense doesn't know what's coming, but on that given play, Arthur Smith could use Kyle Pitts as a wide receiver. And so you can just manipulate what a defense does or force them to show their hand before the snap. And Matt Ryan's going to pick that apart if he knows what's coming. So it's going to be, I think, a lot better on offense, even if Julio Jones is not on this team. But I'm not ready to say that they're in win now mode at this point. And I don't think that they believe that they are either.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the Falcons are going to see a lot of nickel coverages in hopes of figuring out what the hell they're going to do with Kyle Pitts on the opposing side. And to your point, with Drew Brees now retired and the Falcons in their turnover at quarterback, the Bucs are what they are, but nonetheless, the race for second place in the NFC South, not all that unrealistic. I've been saying the same thing, even with the departure of Julio. You replace basically one unicorn player with another. You've got incredible opportunities there. We're talking to William McFadden, podcaster, writer for the Falcoholic SB Nation. Before I let you go, William, we got one more question, and it concerns the backup quarterback. I know you only break down the backup quarterback so much, but we love him here in T-Town, and it almost seemed poetic that he would rejoin one of his former wide receivers in Julio Jones. Unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be the case. But nonetheless, I mean, 10 years in the league himself, and he looks like he's a guy that can at least fit Arthur Smith's scheme. Should he have to come in? Hopefully, for yours and Tommy's sake, that won't be the case. But nonetheless, you get a veteran piece backing up Matt Ryan this season.
I mean, I almost feel like I should be asking you what the Falcons are getting in him. But I think, one of the things that I don't think people necessarily understood as well as maybe we did it in the building was the value of having a veteran backup quarterback. Everybody, it's fun to sit there and say that, oh, we're drafting a young guy with potential and maybe he'll develop into something down the road. But because we've got Matt Ryan, like, we don't necessarily need to spend money on a top backup quarterback or whatever. Having Matt Schaub in the building for so many years under Matt Ryan, he was one of the few quarterbacks in the NFL that had played more than Matt, or played longer, I should say, than Matt Ryan, who was a starter and a Pro Bowler in his own right. And so when you're in the quarterback room, or when you're on the sideline in between offensive series, Matt Schaub is somebody who can sit there and actually have a conversation and communicate to Matt Ryan's level. And you're not getting that with a second-year player who has never played a game. And I think that it would at least make sense to me if that was part of the discussion with bringing AJ McCarron in. And so he's at least got the experience. He can talk about the game. He can share some insights on the stuff he's learned over the years. And I don't think the Falcons are done adding at that position. I don't think they're just going to roll with like two quarterbacks. I wouldn't be shocked if they maybe bring somebody in. I know they've got Felipe Franks as an undrafted guy. We'll see where that goes. But to me, that's the biggest thing is if Matt Ryan goes down, your season's over. So you're not necessarily grabbing a backup quarterback that you expect to play and win games for you. You're getting somebody who can be another set of eyes during games, who can communicate in the quarterback room, on the practice field, and just have those intelligent conversations that will make Matt Ryan better. If I was ever designing a roster, building a roster, my goal for getting a backup quarterback is, okay, what does he do to help our starter and to make our starter as prepared as possible and as good as possible? And it makes complete sense to me that you would go get a 10-year veteran who can at least sit in that room and hold his own with Matt Ryan. And I like the move for that reason alone.
That's William McFadden, podcaster, writer for the Falcoholic. SB Nation, you're getting the applause in the production studio from Tommy Paradise. Well, before you go, man, let them know where they can check out your stuff, where they can follow you, and all things Falcoholic.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Everybody at Falcoholic's awesome. Really appreciate everybody kind of accepting me there, and also all hearing from fans who love the website. You can follow me on Twitter at Will McFadden. I'll have a podcast dropping early tomorrow morning, kind of breaking down all of the Julio stuff. But that podcast is Believe in Falcons. And yeah, I'll have, I think, a piece later this week on the Falcoholic again about just why the Falcons, if they do want to win in the short term, they're right to believe that offense is kind of the key to making that happen while they slowly figure stuff out on the defensive side of the ball. So that's what I've got coming down the pipe.
Sounds great. The Falcoholic, William McFadden. Thanks so much for joining us, man. Excellent insight. We'll have to do it again sometime. Take it easy.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. William McFadden of the Falcoholic. An incredible segment. Tommy Paradise is still clapping in the production studio. We'll take a break. We'll come back, and I'll let you know. So don't go anywhere. But I'll let you know why Julio Jones is, in fact, despite Tua Tagovailoa, despite Josh Jacobs, Julio Jones still to this day is my favorite Crimson Tide player of all time. All that and more. Off the Edge, Tide 100.9 right here. We'll be right back. Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge. What an incredible conversation it was with William McFadden. A lot of insights into what's going on with the Atlanta Falcons. I know Tommy enjoyed it. If you're a Falcons fan, I know you enjoyed it. I know we had a surplus of Atlanta Falcons fans join us on the stream for a short while. I hope you decided to hang around. Before we get into the second hour and we got Corey on hold, Tommy, it's always been this way. I went to Baldwin County High School, which is about an hour north of Foley, which is where Julio Jones went to high school. So he was the stuff of legend when I was in middle school. We'd come in on a Monday in the fall and be like, did you hear what this guy is doing? Or you'd see it on the news or whatever. And then he goes to Alabama. And it was kind of that, Nick Saban's here one year and it's like, okay, get hyped up for Nick Saban. And then the next year it was, here comes Julio Jones, guys. Watch out. He just changed the game. And ever since I got to Alabama, and I kind of learned the full story of why Julio Jones chose Alabama. Even after watching him and being a massive fan of his, have a jersey, the only Alabama jersey I own is a Julio Jones jersey. Is that story of how he chose Alabama because it was the one school. It was the one recruitment process that he went through where they didn't try to just feed him the world, and say, oh, you'll come in, you'll be a starter, you'll be the playmaker, you will be this offense, yada, 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 yada. And he chooses to go to an archaic system where, it's archaic in modern standards. It worked. So I'm not dissing it that harshly. But he decides to go to a system where they run the ball like crazy and his numbers suffered for it, but he was still able to show off the athleticism that made him so special. Still able to show off all the traits that make him a unicorn player before they started calling Kyle Pitts that. You're not supposed to be able to move the way Julio Jones does. 6'3", 220. Trust me, I've been at that size and weight, and not in a million years could I move like Julio Jones. And so many other people can't. He was DK Metcalf before DK Metcalf. He was Calvin Johnson before Calvin Johnson. He had this thing completely figured out, and he's so exciting to watch. But the mentality is what I have always appreciated out of him since kind of learning the ins and outs of his recruitment process. What makes him special, and William talked about it, is he's not a selfish guy, despite having all the talent in the world and despite having the world handed to him as a prospect just for being great at football. He's still an incredibly humble guy that says, put me at the bottom of the depth chart when I arrive and let me prove that I'm the best guy out there. And he did it each and every time he got an opportunity, working his way up to be a starter at Alabama, not just being handed that role, but working his way up and flashing in the Clemson game that opened the season that year and showing the world that he really does have that capability to be an all-world player. Unfortunately, at Alabama, his stats never showed it. But when he got into the league, it was clear from the get-go that he had those kind of goods, that he wasn't going to be that bust that was so heavily weighing on people's minds because of the production at Alabama. But then, moving now into the NFL and you have to be the number one guy, seamless transition. And like I told William too, one of the greatest catches we ever saw in Super Bowl history was Julio Jones, and it was negated. I'm sorry, but you can't look back on that game and think every play went the Patriots' way, because it didn't. Because Julio Jones dominated that game for 3.5 quarters, regardless of which way you spin it. And to me, no matter what, I love Tua Tagovailoa. The greatest quarterback I've ever seen play at Alabama is Tua Tagovailoa. I love Mac Jones and what he did. Najee Harris, an all-time favorite of mine. Josh Jacobs for his story and the way he ran the football. But Julio will never be trumped as my favorite player in Alabama history, I don't think. Will Anderson's kind of getting up there, not gonna lie. But the way he went about it and the way he did it, forever immortalized here at Alabama. An all-time great. And I'm excited to see what's next for him. As long as he's not wearing purple or brown next year, I'm excited to see what's next for him.
Honest to God, I think a sleeper team is the Titans. Honest to God, I think
the money is the only issue there.
But look, when Julio Jones is on the table, you find the damn money. Okay,
yeah.
That's why I said New England Patriots are the runner for me, Bill Belichick will find the damn money.
Oh,
he doesn't care where it is. He'll find it.
The Browns, the Ravens, the Chargers, the Colts, those teams have the money. But the Titans, I mean, Julio had to feel pretty confident dealing with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback after all those years of Matt Ryan. Tannehill, obviously not bad. He's certainly found his niche. But nonetheless, you play with A.J. Brown and with Derrick Henry. I was talking to Mason, who's our resident Titans fan, and he was saying, yeah, find the money. But down the line, you're going to have to let go of some of the younger pieces because of that contract. He's due like $27 million over the next 2 years with an opt-out after that. And that year, the 2023 year, he's due like $11.5 million. So this isn't going to get any cheaper. And you're going to, no matter which team does this, unless they have ridiculous cap space like the Ravens and the Patriots do, then you're going to have to let go of some proven commodities after their rookie contracts. And you have to be willing to decide, is it worth the price up front with the draft picks and the capital? And is it worth the price down the road to get a 32-year-old wide receiver with injury problems who is still, despite those two negatives, still a top 5 receiver in the league?
I'm just stating this for the fact to all NFL teams. I would like to apologize for Thomas Dimitroff. We don't share the first same name for a reason. My parents gave it to me because it was my grandfather. He shares it to make me look like a moron. The contract he gave Julio while keeping Julio in Atlanta was ridiculous. Dimitroff just like throwing money around. And it made me mad because now I think I saw a tweet that there was like $10.5 million owed to like 3 different players.
Yeah.
One was Desmond Trufant, and I can't remember the other 2 off my head, but he went wild, and it didn't help Atlanta in the long run. Now, this isn't a money issue with Julio. I think it's just maybe it's time to move on. He just wasn't thinking, and it makes me mad that this might have influenced it. But once again, as I said at the top of the show, as you were so kind to give me time, I only wear the Falcons logo to cheer for him. I don't work with the organization. I don't think they'd let me work with the organization because they've seen my tweets. But, I just... Wherever he goes, I once again will state it, and I'm on record. You can see me waving my hand. I'll still cheer for him. I don't care. I love Julio Jones. He played for Alabama. There's no reason to root against him unless he's playing against us. That's what I want Atlanta fans to know most, is that when he went undisputed this morning, by the way, you keep saying undefeated. It should be named that, by the way, I will say.
No, I think they're pretty defeated.
It just seemed out of character. It didn't seem like him, and maybe it was staged to fool us all because in media there are staged things, but he's always been a team guy, so that call didn't make much sense to me. But hey, maybe he thought he was off the record, and Shannon Sharp, as much as I respect the guy, caught him off guard.
Yeah, maybe. And to your point about Dimitroff, you can't backload every contract. It saves you money right now, but then somebody's got to deal with it later, and if you're hoping it's you, that's a train wreck that you've got to deal with. We'll take our top of the hour break. We'll come back. Corey is on the line. We'll talk to him. Joey Blackwell, Bama Central, will join us at 8:15 to talk all things Crimson Tide sports. So, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Drop a like, share the stream, subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter at Off the Edge 109. Give us a like and a follow there as well. I'm Jacob Harrison at JHarrisonOTE. We'll be right back for the second hour of Off the Edge right here on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports.
O'Reilly. Don't miss out on Clean Car Month at O'Reilly Auto Parts. If your car could use a spring cleaning, stop by for great deals on everything you need to keep your car looking new. Like Mother's California Gold Wash and Wax, just $4.99 for a 64-ounce bottle. That's a $6 savings. Visit the professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts today or O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
A Town Square media station.
WTUG HD2 Northport, W265CG Tuscaloosa, Tide 100.9, and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app. The pressure is on. Lights out. This is Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Quarterback back at the 5, steps up, gets drilled. Yes, sir, he gets mashed. And that is going to be the ball game. Alabama wins the ball game.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Now, here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
Hello there, welcome back into the second hour of Off the Edge. I am your host, Jacob Harrison, and it has gotten considerably cooler outside, so I love it. I even stole Ryan Fowler's fan again, so it feels extra cozy here in the studio. I feel great. We had an incredible conversation with William McFadden. Tommy and I were still gushing over it during the break, so be sure to check that out on the podcast center, Tide109.com. We'll also have it up on YouTube. By the way, I'm getting back into the YouTube videos. I'm gonna discipline myself, get back on track with those, and provide you guys with some sweet content. Off the Edge 109 on YouTube. Go give us a subscribe there as well. 205-342-9904. If you ever want to jump into the show, you're more than welcome to. You can also join us in the comment section. Before we get to Corey and Trustville, though, do have to remind you the show is brought to you by Alabama Vintage, AlabamaVTG.com. Be sure to give them a follow on Instagram as well at Alabama VTG. Charlie has got some incredible products. You see the Jeff Gordon vintage hat there being displayed by Tommy Paradise. He has more than just Alabama gear, guys. He has pro gear, NASCAR gear, you name it, he's got it, of all types of brands, all types of eras. Your favorite team is in that store. I promise you. Just go give them a check out at 2210 University Boulevard under the Crimson Awning across from City Hall, heart of downtown Tuscaloosa. And of course, they've got all the Alabama gear from all the eras: Bear Bryant, Gene Stallings, the early ages of the Nick Saban dynasty. It's all there at Alabama Vintage. And whether you need it on your person or in your home, Charlie will hook you up with some sweet vintage gear for your Crimson Tide fandom. Alabama Vintage, Alabama VTG, at Alabama VTG on Instagram, where you can keep up with all the latest items and the latest sales. Let's jump out to the hotline, 205-342-9904. Welcome in Corey from Trustville. Corey, what's going on, man?
Hey, Jacob, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing incredible. It's been a fun day.
Yeah, really interested where Julio Jones will go. I'm not surprised this is going on. I think he wants to win, and I think ever since the Super Bowl debacle, I think he's looking for a chance to get a Super Bowl ring before he hangs up his cleats. So I'm not surprised, but the main reason why I called is what do you think of Alabama softball this weekend? They look pretty dominant. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. I didn't catch the Clemson game, but I did keep up with it on Twitter, of course. But the Alabama State game went exactly how you kind of expected it to. And winning regionals is what Alabama does. But going to the Super Regionals now and taking on Kentucky, this 3-game series, we saw how they handled them in the SEC championship as well. I would imagine Montana Fouts will probably get the first start Friday at noon for the Crimson Tide here in the Rhodes House. I feel pretty confident about the way this team is going. I feel like their game plan to put people on bases ahead of Bailey Hempill has worked phenomenal. Phenomenal. Wow, I can't say that word. Apparently, phenomenally. Thank you, Ekior. But nonetheless,
Ekior!
nonetheless, that coupled with the pitching, Kilfoyle got back on track as well in that Alabama State game. I feel pretty confident about the direction of Alabama softball, and we'll talk to Joey Blackwell about it at 8:15 too.
Would you say confident is in a sweep this weekend?
Yeah, I would say. I think they proved their mettle. The way they handled Florida was especially indicative of that, because they had, all things considered, Montana Fout's third straight day in the circle, getting up into those 300 pitches and then having to deal to home run hitters. They were still able to combat those sorts of things. Where, Alabama plays a little bit more small ball, but they've proven that they can keep pace with their small ball and also combat, home run hitters and game wreckers. And I think that's the test that you really need to face. Now, as it pertains to that, Tennessee played a little bit more small ball, and Alabama had to contend with that a little bit more or less when Kilfoyle was in the circle, obviously. And that's kind of what I saw out of Oklahoma in the game that I got to see from them. So things will escalate as you get further and further into the competition. But I think these girls have proven that they're of the mindset that they are the competition, and just meeting those other elite teams really and truly is what you come to Alabama to do. It's not to beat up on all these little schools and to beat up on the SEC. That's kind of a given. The same way with Alabama football. It's to play the elite teams that are out of conference that you don't get to play on your regular season schedule, and you prove to the world that you really are that damn good.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Alabama wants to get revenge on Kentucky in the sense of losing the series. I mean, I know they did in a way in the SEC tournament, but they want to actually take 2 out of 3, because if you remember when they played Kentucky, they won the first game handily. The second game, there was just defensive miscues galore, but they lost 4-2. And then the last game, Alabama had a lead going into the 7th, and they let them tie it up. And then they walked it off with a single in the bottom of the 8th. And so it wasn't like Kentucky dominated the 2 games we lost. We let it slip away in a way. So I think Alabama wants to prove a point that those 2 games were not what Alabama was. And also you have to remember, they were still dealing. I think that was the week before Bailey Dowling got injured against Tennessee, so they were still trying to figure things out. So Alabama's a much more different team now. They are a much more dominant team, and they're playing at home. So I think, at least I think Alabama should win the Super Regional. Now, I will say this: Kentucky can hit the ball. I mean, I know when you get in the Super Regional, anything can happen, but the Kentucky can hit the ball, so it's going to be interesting to see what will happen. But I do feel real good about this Alabama team moving forward.
And I think you should. I mean, they're on what, a 14-game winning streak now since dropping one in the Florida
16.
series. 16, yeah. And I mean, they're elite across the board now. Even with the replacements and being 3 deep at shortstop, I think that they've proven to this point that they are elite and that they're going to find themselves in the World Series. Corey, we got to jump out to Joey Blackwell next. It's always fun talking to you, Ben.
Good talk to you, Jacob. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. So Joey Blackwell, Bama Central, will join us next. We'll talk softball, baseball, Crimson Tide defense, and more right here on Off the Edge. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports. Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge. I am your host, Jacob Harrison. We're getting set to speak with my good pal, Joey Blackwell of Bama Central. You can find him on the Twitter machine at Blackwell Sports, covering all things Crimson Tide sports. They got him out on the diamond. They've got him out in the booth in football as well, basketball, you name it. Joey's got it. Joey, what's going on, man?
Doing all right, Jacob. How about yourself?
I'm doing incredible. It's been a fun day. There was actually news on a Monday in the off season.
Doesn't happen very often these days, but glad to see it.
No doubt. But jumping right off of that, the news of the day is Julio Jones being cold called for all intents and purposes by the what you Shannon Sharp of Undisputed. I keep saying undefeated. Undisputed. Fox Sports 1. And it was bizarre in every facet of the meaning, but nonetheless, Julio Jones does put to bed and confirms the worst kept secret in the National Football League this year, that he does in fact want out of Atlanta just as bad as their cap space does want him out as well. What do you make out of this entire situation with Julio Jones and the Falcons?
Well, first and foremost, I really hope that the cold call was staged. I've heard a lot of talk about how some people were curious as to if it was staged or not. I really hope it was, because Julio Jones is the type of guy that's kind of always stuck to himself and a pretty humble guy, and Lord knows you don't want to see him get taken aback and all that be put out there when he didn't want it out there. But regardless about that, about the decision itself, there's a lot of teams that could be in the running. The Patriots I've heard talked about a lot. Belichick and Shanahan, they tend to look at things similarly, and this, coach has a thing for 30-something superstars. You think about Randy Moss, back in the day coming to the Patriots. They've added some pass catchers in free agency, but Kendrick Bourne was kind of a one-year proposition, being under $5 million contract. Nelson Aguilar was kind of a one-year wonder for them. This offense needs to make a huge leap from where it was a year ago, and Julio Jones could definitely add to that. Another team that I could see him going to, which Twitter kind of set on fire. I think it was out yesterday, the day before, with Julio Jones and Derrick Henry working out together. But I think the Titans could be kind of to put it in this way, kind of a sleeper team. There's an obvious connection between the Falcons organization with Titans offensive coordinator Arthur Smith. He's now the head coach of the Falcons, and I think those players. The Titans lost a top tight end, and their number 2 receiver in the off season, and those players, left a large gap that Tennessee didn't want to pay. Well, now they can probably take Julio. It would need some reworking with their money situation there, but they could get him, and I think that they could also be a good fit for him as well.
Looking back, I mean, it's been 10 years since Julio Jones caught his last pass at Alabama. Left an incredible legacy here. Broke all sorts of records, and became one of the first, top 10 picks in the Nick Saban era as well. But just looking back on that time, you and I, are about the same age, and that was a time where we were learning a lot about football and about Alabama football as well. But we were seeing a blossoming of a new era in Tuscaloosa as well, and he was kind of the guy that started it all. How do you remember Julio Jones and the Crimson?
I remember Julio Jones as, obviously he was one of the, if not the first, big wide receiver prospects in the Nick Saban era. Obviously his size was, when you see him, when you first saw him on the field, his size was one of the first things that impressed me about him, as it did for a lot of people. He wasn't the best wide receiver in college. He wasn't a Henry Ruggs or an Amari Cooper at the college level or Devontae Smith, but it didn't matter, because when he finally got to the league, it translated over very, very well. And that's, what we've seen over the past decade. I think, Julio is, getting up there in age, but he still has a lot of, gas in the tank. He's still got a lot of good seasons of football. Now, unfortunately, injuries have kind of hurt him over the past few years. But even that, he still, leads the Falcons franchise in multiple records. And I think he's still got a lot left in him. But going back to, his play, I remember watching him play on the TV screen back before I was a sports writer, and thinking to myself, this guy's going to make waves in the NFL. And that's exactly what he did.
No doubt. I mean, 10 years, he's the all-time leading receiver in catches and yards. I'm pretty sure in touchdowns, and it just feels rude to say because all the touchdown stigma that surrounds Julio Jones all those years in Atlanta. But moving on to current times in Crimson Tide sports. I know you're in Birmingham for the tournament on the old diamond. Catch us up on what's been going on in Alabama baseball.
Well, the story for Alabama baseball right now was it came out that their first baseman, Drew Williamson, will be out of the tournament, along with the guy they were using as backup, Davis Heller. Unfortunately, Drew Williamson will be missing from the lineup. He has a broken hamate bone in his wrist. He's still got a cast. He won't be playing this week. Along with that, Heller has a really bad, according to Bohannon, it was a pretty bad torn hamstring, and he'll be out. So they're going to be really weak on the left side. They're having to move. I know the first base is on the right side, but they're having to move their typical third baseman and Zane Denton over to first base. And on top of that, the shift has caused Evelyn to move to short and Jarvis over to third base. So they're going to be weak on the interior compared to how they normally are. Drew Williamson's bat was also very impressive this year for Alabama. He's third on the team and runs the season with 32. He also leads the team in doubles. I think he had 12 doubles this season so far, and he's contributed 21 RBIs over the course of the season. So his bat will be missed, but it really creates some defensive problems on the Alabama infield. Bohannon also announced today that Tyler Ross will be the starter in the diamond on the mound tomorrow for Alabama. Ross, of course, had to take over kind of that Friday starter job since Connor Prelip went down with an injury. And, Prelip was only able to start 3 games this year, even though he was a preseason first-team All-American. He hasn't been able to contribute much this year due to that injury. And combine that with Antoine John, who had a really solid freshman year last year before the season was unfortunately cut short. He hasn't been able to play in over a month because of an undisclosed injury to him as well. Just a lot going on with injuries for this Alabama team. They're having to face a pretty solid South Carolina team. When the first name you think of when you think of South Carolina baseball is, their designated hitter, utility, Wes Clark, who made the All-SEC second team. He has 21 home runs, which is tied for second in all of NCAA baseball right now at the Division I level. So they're going to have their hands full. It's going to be if Alabama can win one tomorrow. Of course, they'll move on to a double elimination style play because the first 4 games are all single elimination. But if they can move on, they'll have 2 games, and those will make it minimum to Thursday. If they can at least win a couple, that'll definitely help their standings and potentially making an NCAA regional. As of right now, according to multiple, most of the big sites that do projections have Alabama as one of the first 5 teams out. And so if they can make a deep run in this tournament, they still have a shot of making a regional. That being said, if they lose tomorrow, it's looking it would look less and less likely that they'll make a regional this year.
Yeah, and just 3-4 weeks ago that seemed implausible. They were middle of the pack in the SEC West, which is a hell of an accomplishment, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know. But nonetheless, they lose 8 of their last 9, correct? And they're just on a downward trend. Now they head into this SEC tournament, and regardless of the sport, and regardless of if you're a high seed or a low seed, it's always, well, anything can happen. But you do start off with South Carolina. But all these things that have kind of compounded upon themselves. What's needed to right the ship here in the next few days before they take on South Carolina?
Well, the good thing for Alabama is that they haven't played South Carolina yet this year. And I talking about them, I think they lost 7 of their last 8 games. It doesn't help that they had to travel and play number 2 Vanderbilt. They didn't have to play at LSU, which LSU is not the LSU baseball that we know very well, but or familiar with, but it's still LSU baseball. And then, of course, they hosted number 6 Mississippi State, which they could be ranked higher if there weren't so many other SEC teams up in the rankings. But that didn't help them. But talking about what they need to do moving forward this week, first things first, their relievers need to be solid tomorrow. Tyler Ross needs to hopefully go a little bit deeper than he normally does. He typically goes about 3 innings. If they could stretch him out to 5 and he's still pitching well, that'll really help them if they can pull off the win to go deeper in the tournament. If he's only able to do 2 or 3, then that creates, of course, a bullpen situation, having, potentially 5 consecutive days of games and you have a shallow bullpen. That doesn't really help you out. So hopefully Ross will be able to start a little bit deeper tomorrow. Hopefully they'll get a lot of practice. They practiced today at the Hoover Met. Hopefully they can get their infield, because together because this past weekend against Mississippi State, they had to start Denton at first, like I said earlier. And unfortunately, that resulted in a couple of balls getting past him, a couple of guys reaching base that shouldn't. And that's not on him. The guy's not used to playing on the right side of the field. His bat is still as good as ever. Denton's come in clutch a lot this season for them, so it's good to still have him in the batter's box. But they're really going to need to tighten down the defensive infield, work on their pitching, and then you really need the bats to come alive. They've, prior to these past few weeks, their bats are doing pretty good. Like you said, they were in the middle of the pack in the SEC West, which is a pretty stellar accomplishment. But their bats have kind of quieted down a little bit. So if they can get that going, and then, of course, I would assume that Dylan Smith would start on Wednesday. That's saying if they win tomorrow. If they can get some run production behind Dylan Smith, which they haven't been able to do so far this year, I think that could be the recipe for them to at least make it to Thursday with 2 wins. It'll be hard, but it's definitely possible for this team.
And because I think you'll answer this the way I think you will. You're an average team in the SEC West. Do you want to play a football schedule or a baseball schedule?
I think that, to be completely honest, I think. Sorry, my allergies getting to me.
No, I feel you.
I think. Sorry about that coughing. No, I think I'd rather play football. To be completely honest with you, the SEC West is stacked, and the East is not too shabby as well. People talk about how competitive the SEC is in football, but really, when you look at baseball, it is one of the toughest divisions in all of college sports. It's really tough, and you have the number 1 team in the country in Arkansas, and you have number 2 Vanderbilt, Mississippi State. Ole Miss is always a solid team. It's just a lot of competition for Alabama in the West.
Yeah, I mean, just on a random day, Gump fan that only follows football, there's nothing wrong with that. But take a look at the SEC or take a look at the NCAA top 25 in football, and then take a look at it in baseball. In football, you probably see 7, 8 football teams from the SEC, and in baseball, it's like 10 or 11, sometimes 12. It's pretty ridiculous over there. But moving to the other diamond. Softball will host Kentucky this week in the Super Regionals. Already dealt with them in the SEC tournament in the first round. Took it to them pretty good before struggling a little bit with Tennessee, and then crushing Florida emphatically, if I could say so. I know you don't run rule them or anything, but to handle them the way they did, the softball team is pretty legit, and they look to have another opportunity to head to the World Series after the Kentucky series this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a good, it's going to be a good matchup. Alabama, of course, handled Kentucky relatively easily in the SEC tournament, but let's not forget that Kentucky was one of only 2 teams this year that was able to best Alabama in a 3-game series. The other team, of course, being Florida, who won the regular season, conference title. The thing we have to remember about Alabama against Florida in that 3rd game, was Fouts' 3rd day in a row on the mound, and she was still able to shut them out 4-0, which was quite impressive. But this Alabama-Kentucky matchup, I really like it in Alabama's favor. Of course, they're coming home to play at Rhodes once again. 2 weekends in a row, actually 3 weekends in a row, if you could count the SEC tournament.
Right.
So really good matchup for them. Kentucky has been able to slip by them a couple of times this season. But it's still a good favorable matchup for Alabama, and the fact that they have to play either Arizona or Arkansas is also really favorable if they make it to the Women's College World Series next week. I really, I think, what's going to be behind this game, as it always is for Alabama, is the pitching. We had Kilfoyle this past weekend pitch that combined no-hitter with Crystal Goodman in a 6th inning, mercy rule game. And then on top of that, of course, Fouts was just dominant as always. And Alabama's bats haven't been as hot as they were, earlier in the season, in the middle of the season, but it hasn't mattered because their pitching has been so dominant in the circle. And I think their pitching has gotten this far, and that's not a discredit to their bats at all. Their bats are still solid. And of course, we still have Bailey Hemphill to contend with for the other team, which is terrifying. But if you're an opponent, but I think their pitching is going to get them through. I think Kentucky's lineup doesn't really stand a chance, but that's just my opinion.
Well, that's kind of interesting because that was kind of where my next question was going to go, because when I watch this team, their ability to get on base is very impressive. Despite Bailey Hemphill having 3 times as many walks as she does home runs, because she's such a threat, she's really the only home run threat. I mean, you do see a few others sprinkled in here and there, but Alabama's a small ball, get on base kind of team, and they execute that game plan brilliantly. And Montana Fouts, no doubt, probably the best pitcher in all of college softball. But behind her, Kilfoyle did look good against Alabama State. And we haven't seen a lot out of Crystal Goodman. Haven't seen Cornball outside of being a pinch runner in a long time. So which would concern you more, not only in the Kentucky series, but even looking forward? And I know I shouldn't look ahead, but I feel pretty confident about this team. But even looking ahead, is it the lack of heavy bats, even in the face of the good small ball game plan, or is it the questions in the pitching depth?
No, I think the pitching depth will get them, as far as they need to. I'm not really concerned with that at all. I mean, you do have Kilfoyle and Goodman, which, are, of course, on a lower level than Fouts, but Fouts has proven time and time again that she can go long, complete games and then come out the very next day and do it again,
right.
Rinse and repeat. I'm not worried about their pitching depth at all, barring an injury, which, of course, none of us want. You hate to see that. I think Alabama's going to be fine in the rotation. As far as their bats are concerned, you're right. They don't have very many heavy bats. I mean, Hemphill leads the team, of course, with 12 home runs this year, and second is Kaylee Tao with 7. And then you have to go even further down to 3 home runs for Savannah Woodard. But that doesn't really concern me. Over the past couple of weeks, we haven't seen of course, they had the 9-0 win, which was the mercy rule, but we haven't seen as much mercy rules as of late, which, a win's a win. But when there's not a mercy rule with Alabama softball, typically that means there's not a lot of as much run production as normal. So that's a little bit of a concern, especially because, every round the opponents are going to get more and more difficult. But that being said, you still have, Kaylee Tao, who has 13 doubles this year. You have KB Sides, who has 10 doubles. You have Alexis Mack, who's just been very consistent. She leads team batting average with 428, I believe is what it is. You still have those consistent players that are able to get on base. If I had to pick between the two, I would say that I'll be a little bit more concerned with Alabama bats than, pitching in the circle. But that being said, this is still a really solid Alabama team. And as odd as this is for me to say, I think when you're looking at it from a national scale, I think number 3 is honestly a little low for Alabama. I think they could be ranked a little bit higher.
Oh, no doubt, especially when you consider Oklahoma did not have to go through the rigors of an SEC schedule or an SEC tournament with one pitcher. Just saying. Hey, I bet you didn't know it was possible, but we went 17 minutes without me asking you an Alabama football question.
Oh, goodness gracious. We need to write that down. I think that's a record.
I mean, technically, I did ask you about Julio Jones at Alabama, but that was the news of the day. It doesn't count.
You caught me off guard. You had me reminiscing at the beginning of the segment. Now I'm caught off guard.
Right. We're talking to Joey Blackwell, Bama Central beat writer. He covers it all for the guys at Sports Illustrated. Joey, we do need to talk about Alabama football, though, because that's what pays the bills around here. I can't stop. I'm a defensive guy, but I can't stop looking at this defense, and we haven't been able to talk since Henry Toto was announced his transfer to the University of Alabama. So I just from that standpoint, bringing him in, all this depth in the front seven. When we get done talking to you, I'm going to talk about the depth on the defensive line. That's probably 10 deep. And then at inside linebacker with Toto, you're at least 4 deep there too. And on the edges, you still feel comfortable too. So just that front seven, you add in Henry Toto, that's pretty damn dangerous, don't you think?
Oh yeah, landing Toto is fantastic get for Alabama, and it just I feel like I say this every time I'm on this show, and it's just another example of the rich getting richer with the new transfer rule. He was a former top 50 recruit in 2019. He's going to he made an instant impact as a freshman. At Tennessee, he had 72 tackles and 5 tackles for loss. He had all SEC freshman team honors, of course, in his first year. And just adding that, he's a high upside guy, and his commitment, he upgrades the position, and he's going to fit really well with Alabama and the other, the rest of the linebackers that they have there. But moving on to the defensive line, I've been really comparing the potential for this defensive line to really rival the 2015 defensive line, which in my opinion is probably the best that Alabama's had. That unit consisted of Ashawn Robinson, Jaron Reed. Of course, you had Jonathan Allen. He was technically really a backup in that group. If any time Jonathan Allen's a backup, that says something. You had Dalvin Tomlinson that year, but to this year, you have a really good, defensive line core. You have, of course, LeBrian Ray and Phil Mathis, DJ Dale, Justin Boygby. Let's not forget Byron Young or Tim Smith. The three juniors and Dale Boy being young, they've played a bunch of football since their freshman year, so they've gotten that experience despite them only being juniors. And it's just this defense is just going to be very impressive this year. I think that and Alabama's defense has been good in recent years as well. I know there's a lot of talk about them being disappointing, but I think a lot of that can be attributed to just the changing face of college football. Gone are the days where you don't allow, where you only allow 3 points or 7 points. Gone are the days where you hold opposing offenses to 120, total yards. Those games are really going to be few and far between, and I think it's going to be the same this year. But just as far as dominating the opposing offensive line, I think Alabama's defensive line this year is going to be something to stare at. They're going to be really good.
They are, and I think health is probably going to be one of the biggest key factors, especially you look at LeBron Ray. Poor guy hasn't been able to finish the season, but I mean, he's got the goods if he can stay out there. And I mean, the fact that you have to name off 4 or 5 people before you say Tim Smith, dude reminds me so much of Christian Barmore. Once he learns, he's going to be unstoppable. And you pair him with guys like Fedarian Mathis and Byron Young that have all this experience, DJ Dale. I mean, I don't know how other offensive lines, because this is an age of turnover in the SEC. There are not a lot of players coming back with a ton of experience, and yet Alabama returns all this experience on defense, not just in the front, but also in the back end. When you talk about Moore is one of the most fantastic freshmen in the SEC. Byron Branch opposite him, all the same. Josh Jobe ready to pick up. Jalen Armour Davis, I think he's got the goods to be that opposite corner. And Jordan Battle, Daniel Wright, and DeMarco Helms. I mean, when you can name 25 guys that can contribute to a defense in a given year, it's not fair.
No, and I think kind of comparing it back to the line of old, I think that Smith could really kind of be compared to Marcel Darius's role in 2009. That season, Darius came in primarily during the dime rabbit, in passing situations, which resulted in 9 tackles for a loss and 6.5 sacks. And I honestly think that Smith could be more athletic. If healthy, Ryan Ray, talking about his injuries, if he's healthy this year, he'll probably be the other third down lineman with, Young, Aboybe, and Mathis and Dale subbing in and out, during first and second down situations. Just there's so many options. The base 3-4 probably have Ray, Mathis, and Dale on the first team. With Aboybe, Smith, and Young as the changeups, but don't be fooled by, what the fall depth chart reads. All these guys are going to be coming out into the field, and it just goes to show just the impressive amount of depth that they have on the line this year. It's I hate to kind of overhype it, but it's going to be a ridiculous defensive line this year.
Hey, you know me. Out of the two of us, I'm the takes guy, and I as soon as Toto was announced, I just went out and said it, and this is the best defense in college football, and everybody else can come fight me about it. I don't know how you could look anywhere else. Everywhere else, they've lost all the key pieces. Alabama returned all of the key pieces, save Patrick Surtain and Dylan Moses and Christian Barmore. I mean, those are 3 incredible players. Don't get me wrong, but when you return eight starters and the depth behind them is just as ridiculous as the starters are, that just speaks volume. Looking outward across the state, most specifically, I don't know if you saw that Bo Nix is apparently a first-round quarterback now, but he's got competition now. TJ Finley joins the Tigers in the quarterback room with everything that Brian Harsin has to contend with. The expectations are going to be sky high on him. He's got to come in and, your job in Auburn is simply to make life a living hell for Alabama. It would appear to be very difficult to do that with a guy like TJ Finley, potentially a quarterback in the future, considering he's already failed to even impose a threat to Alabama once already in his career, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he completed roughly 50% of his passes against Alabama last year, and it resulted in him being benched the final 2 games of the season, in favor of Max Johnson down there in Baton Rouge. And he did start 5 games, of course, as a freshman after Miles Brennan went down with the ab injury. But I think it brings some sense of talent at quarterback to Auburn. I think that he could compete with Bo Nix. I think. And this is once again maybe my bias showing a little bit here, but I think Bo Nix has been overhyped again and again. And, I think that Finley could be the answer. Now, it's a little late. I don't foresee, Finley coming in now and all of a sudden starting this year. I don't see that at all. I think it's a little too late for him to start on the gridiron this year for the Tigers. But I still think that he could come in, make an impact. We might see him, if Auburn's pulling ahead, we could see him, coming in late, and late in the games in garbage time, getting a little bit ready. And of course, if Nix were to, struggle a little bit, we might see him put in there. I still think Nix is a day one starter, but he definitely has a lot more competition on that roster than he did 24 hours ago.
Yeah, and you might get to see him plenty of times. I think Auburn just scheduled another Group of 5 team on their schedule this year.
Hey, now.
I know Alabama's guilty too, but that schedule is something else. They start with Akron. Are you serious?
Well, I mean, when Alabama plays other SEC teams, it makes them look like cupcakes. You might as well throw some icing on there as well with these Group of 5 teams.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Hey, man, that's all I got for you tonight. Tell them where they can check you out at Bama Central.
All right. Well, of course, like Jacob just said, everybody can check me out at BamaCentral.com. You can also check out all my stories on Twitter at Blackwell Sports. Tomorrow morning, I'll have a little bit more in-depth SEC tournament preview with Alabama, of course, at the center of that. And should be a good week here in Birmingham. Hopefully, Bama makes it more than one day so that I can stick out here a little bit longer. It's going to be a good tournament regardless. Last year, of course, we didn't have it, and it's just good to get back to that sense of normalcy with first the SEC basketball tournament, the SEC softball tournament, and now here in Birmingham for the baseball.
Absolutely, Joey Blackwell at Blackwell Sports. Enjoy your time back home in Birmingham, dude. Take it easy.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime. Joey Blackwell, go check him out at Blackwell Sports and be sure to give his stuff a read. Does incredible features. He's a Big J journalist to my Hot Take Radio guy. One of the best writers in this entire city. I do not say that as his friend. I say that as a fellow sports writer, talking head kind of guy. So be sure to go check out Joey Blackwell's content. Absolutely. We have more coming here in the final 2 segments of Off the Edge. I'm Jacob Harrison. This is Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports. Hello there. Welcome back into Off the Edge. I'm Jacob Harrison, your host. Had an incredible conversation with Joey Blackwell as well. Had some fun guests tonight, man. Talking it up, talking some Atlanta Falcons with the Julio Jones situation, with William McFadden of the Falcoholic, and just now a lot of Diamond Sports. Bet you didn't know I could go 20 minutes about Diamond Sports, did you, Tommy? Didn't know I had it in me.
Okay, look. I never said that. Let's put that on the record, since tonight I've been going on the record a lot. Also, my favorite is the Alabama-Tennessee game in the SEC tournament. I remember I was watching it here.
Right.
And from my vantage point, I thought the outfielder cut the ball. And then I knew something was right when she started rounding the bases. And then I looked down at Twitter, and then I see you in all caps tweet, "Hemp Hill!" And I was like, oh, something good happened.
Yeah, something great happened. It's been a lot of fun to watch the softball team. I'm not gonna lie. Got to definitely tune in Friday at noon as I'm writing my article. And I'm guilty. You probably just saw it. I'm in here watching the Penguins playoff game against the Islanders, and just a second ago, you saw me smiling at my phone. They were introducing Najee Harris at the game. He was there in full Pittsburgh gear. For the towel time, and the fans were cheering him on. It's the first time they've gotten to see him in person since he was selected as the 24th overall draft pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So hopefully the Penguins can pull this one out. I think they're losing. No, it's tied. It's 2-2 in overtime. They just started their overtime period, and the series is tied 2-2. So they got to get this one done, right? I mean,
they have Najee there. It's possible.
Right. Anything's
the
possible.
golden boy has arrived. Also, that's a cool looking score bug.
Isn't it? Hockey's went all out, man. I think they've had a good playoff here. I know the Penguins had an exciting one the other day, so I got to get more into hockey. It's such a barbarian sport.
You and me both. I'm a Devils fan because my dad's a Devils fan, but I got to watch it more.
Incredible team name, by the way.
Oh,
the marketing
Hell
and
yeah.
designs of the New Jersey Devils is A+. Now, I mean, it doesn't touch Penguins and black and gold. Sorry, but that's perfect for hockey. It doesn't get better than an angry penguin. But nonetheless, I got to get more into it. And all these Alabama fans do too. I know it's played on ice. It's a Yankee sport or whatever. These dudes beat the ever-loving hell out of each other. And I know the biggest problem is the same problem that golf and baseball have. There's not enough scoring. But they've implemented a lot of rules. There's a lot more scoring nowadays. And a lot of the seeding and rankings and standings and outcomes and all that are determined by the number of points that you score. So big incentivizer to these teams to put more points on the board. It's been exciting, but it's 2-2 game between the Islanders and the Penguins in overtime. So enjoying that here in the studio. Look, I wanted to talk two other topics, but I did go long with both of my guests because that's what I do, because I learned from Ryan Fowler. Hey. But nonetheless, I do want to discuss this topic. I know it's an evergreen topic, and we'll touch on the defensive line a little bit later. I think we have a Friday show this week, so no doubt, got to expand the content, right?
Nice.
But we will be back on Fridays now that baseball will not be playing, unless they, of course, are still playing Friday in the tournament. But there's all this talk about all the changes and the evolution that college football is undergoing, right? And I know that there's a lot of concern, and change is scary. I get it. And even as somebody like me, whose mindset is to look for improvements in things and find ways to make things better and to work better, to be more fluid, and to achieve what you've set out to achieve, which with the college football playoff is to market this thing as anybody can get in. And the NCAA marketing itself as, an organization for the betterment of its players, of its athletes, of its student athletes. I think a lot of these changes are with good intentions. They're just going to be broken at first. They are. Because all things are. It's not just because it's the NCAA or because the government's involved. No, it's because when you try new things, they're broken. The college football playoff is broken. Great idea. Some of us asked for it. A lot of people thought it would break college football. I don't think it's done that. I think we're still in a situation where it's still the same elite teams. And some teams, you can make something happen. Look what LSU did. I know they're an elite team, but they went from middle of the road almost elite, and then they had one of the greatest seasons we've ever seen and went on and won the championship. Like, it's set up for that. And the way that it's evolving is a good thing. I don't think that college football would play itself. It's not going to make all these decisions to say, let's ruin this massive moneymaker we've got for ourselves just by throwing ideas at the wall and seeing which ones stick. That's not what they're doing at all. And I don't think they're necessarily caving to the peer pressure from players and from fans and from people like me that get paid to never shut up. This is a modern approach to what college football is. You're not an amateur if you pay the bills of billionaires. You're not. Are you on a certain rung of the ladder? Hey, we all have jobs, right? But the what college football is not amateurism. At least not in the Power 5. And I think that's where our problem stands. Is so often when these rules are implemented, that's when we as Alabama fans or we as Power 5 fans or whatever say, what about the little guy? What's this going to do to the little guy? Well, Alabama had 9 people transfer out of the program. That's 9 great athletes that are going to go play somewhere else. Only one of those was a walk-on, and apparently he was pretty freaking good too, according to a video that he put out. So you've got plenty of opportunity for these smaller schools. Alabama brought in 3 guys, and they let go of 9. So there's chances for these smaller schools. And the NIL will fix itself over time too. It's not going to be perfect when it first arrives later this year, hopefully. And it's going to cater to the elite too. And that's fine. That's what college football is. It caters to the elite. That's great. I want to watch the best play. That's why spring football, the FCS, I only watch the national championship. I love football. I love it. I can't not watch football. But I want to see the best of the best. And that's why I only watch the FCS National Championship. I don't watch their playoffs and all this other sort of stuff. I think they're proof that you can still allow for elite teams and dynasties and still allow everyone to feel included and kind of balance the system. And I'm not looking for participation awards by saying everyone can feel included, because that's what bowl games are. Y'all want to talk about how it's okay to lose 1 game and go to the playoffs. Bro, it's okay to lose 7 and go to a bowl game. You can lose 7 games in a season and still come home with a ring and a fat trophy. That's messed up. And there are people, I understand the traditional side of it, but you can't argue against that and then argue against a 11-1 team gets nothing, or a 12-1 team gets nothing, or a 13-0 Cincinnati team gets nothing. I can't stand with that. You've earned the right to go out and compete for something, especially when all these New Year's 6 Bowls games don't work. Either one team doesn't come or it's just not a good game. Flat out. The event, and I joked about this with Joey towards the end of our conversation. Eventually, what does need to be fixed is structure in the scheduling. It needs to be taken out of the hands of the programs themselves. Now, I know starting this year and going on into the future, the next 10 years, Alabama's got some pretty good non-conference matchups, but you have got to get these Mercers, these New Mexico States. I know they got bills to pay. I ain't their sugar daddy, and neither is Alabama. Go out and play some other Power 5 schools. And if you can't bring yourself to fix the scheduling, then separate them, because they're not on the same level. Find a way to appease to the elite group of 5 schools to join the Power 5 and separate them. Otherwise, it's going to be broken no matter what you do. I think we're on the right track. Evolution is slow, and it takes a long time to perfect evolution, but it is progress towards a superior being. And with that, this is the Superior Show. No, I'm kidding. This is Off the Edge, Tide 100.9. We will be back Friday night for the first Friday in a long time. I'm going to be disciplined. We're going to have the segments with our guest uploaded to YouTube throughout the week. That final segment will be there as well. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you joined us with the Falcoholic segment and you stuck around, you're a real trooper. I really appreciate that. Like, share, and subscribe to all the streams, all the social medias. Thanks to Charlie and Alabama Vintage. Thanks to Tommy for being the best damn producer around here. I'm Jacob Harrison. This is Off the Edge, Tide 100.9. See you on Friday.